Good morning students, welcome back to the class again. In the previous class we have started breathing and exchange of gases, which is the second unit of second year zoology, and in that class we learned about nostrils, nasal cavity, larynx, bronchi and bronchioles. Continuing to that, today we will be learning about lungs, breathing mechanism and steps in the breathing. Okay, let's start the class. Let's learn about the lungs now. Lungs are very important parts in the body because they are useful for breathing process. They appear like a sponge and they are located in the chest cavity, and we call this chest cavity technically a thoracic chamber. So basically they are located in the thoracic chamber. Okay, and lungs are covered by a protective epithelial membrane, and the membrane is called as pleura. Since it is two layered, it is called double layered pleura, and between these two layers there is a cavity, and this cavity is called as pleural cavity. Okay, and this cavity is filled by the pleural fluid, and it is useful for protecting the lungs from the sudden jerks and the shocks. Okay, and if you see the lungs, the structure of it, and you can find basically two parts. The first part is the conducting part and the second part is respiratory part. Conducting part is nothing but the respiratory tree. In the previous class I told you, right from the nose there is a tubular structure till the alveolar sac, isn't it? Nostrils, nasal cavity, bronchi, bronchioles, primary, secondary, tertiary and terminal bronchioles. So all these tubular network structure makes the conducting part through which the air passes into the lungs, and the actual and most important part of the lung is respiratory part. Here you find alveolar sacs and alveolar ducts. This is the place where the actual exchange of gases take place. Here I shown you some pictures. So this is a bronchi and these are the bronchioles, isn't it? So at the end, if you take a small section of it, it appears like this. Okay, so here the respiratory part ends, and from here there will be alveolar ducts. So I'm drawing here, all these are alveolar ducts, and whatever the ball like structures you're able to see here are called as alveolus. Okay, a single one is alveolus, and if many alveolus got together, they are called alveoli. So if you take the one particular alveolar section, you can find this kind of structure. So alveolus is basically supplied with blood capillaries, so that carbon dioxide which is taken from all parts of the body is mixed in the blood, and through blood it comes to the alveoli, and there from the blood the carbon dioxide moves outside and diffuses outside to the alveolar sac, and whatever the oxygen we breathe, it goes inside the blood. So the oxygen and carbon dioxide getting exchanged here, you are able to see oxygen getting inside the blood and carbon dioxide is rushing outside the blood and coming into the alveolar sac, and from there carbon dioxide is got out in the process of expiration, that means exhalation, and while we inhale the oxygen is got inside. So the alveolus is the functional unit of the lungs. Okay, so lungs are basically protected by ribs, sternum, vertebral column and diaphragm. I'll tell you where they are located. Ribs are located at the surrounding of the lungs, and sternum located anteriorly at the front side, and from the back side it is protected by vertebral column, and downwards below the lungs you can find the diaphragm. So this is the diaphragm, and this diaphragm, strips and intercostal muscles are useful in the breathing mechanism. Let's see what it is. The mechanism of breathing. So if you normally observe your lungs while you are breathing, you can notice a few things. You can notice that your rib cage is expanding and contracting while you are taking the breathe in, or when you are inhaling, the air is rushing inside and your chest cavity is getting increased. And as you are exhaling, keeping the air outside, you find that your lungs are contracting. So there are two changes that you are able to see. One is your lungs are expanding and they are also getting contracting. So in the inhalation they are expanding, in the exhalation they are contracting. So this contracting and relaxation, this process is called as breathing mechanism. Okay, so this process is possible due to the partial pressure. Okay, so the pressure gradient which is there inside the lungs and atmosphere. So let us see what it is. So here I mentioned some points. Breathing is possible due to pressure gradient between lungs and atmosphere. So there is a difference in the pressure of atmosphere and the lungs due to the different pressures between the atmosphere, lungs, and the breathing goes on. Let's see. The variation in intrapulmonary pressure basically causes inspiration and expiration. So the pressure which is present inside the lungs is called as intrapulmonary pressure. Okay, so the pressure inside the lungs is called as intrapulmonary pressure. I am repeating it again because it is basically causes the inspiration and expiration, nothing but inhalation and expiration. Next, let's see. IPP means intrapulmonary pressure. If it is low, it causes the inhalation, and if intrapulmonary pressure is high, it causes the expiration, which is in exhalation. Okay, let's see further. Now let's learn about the mechanism of breathing. Just now I told you that breathing involves two processes. The first process is inhalation, that is taking the air inside, and the second process is exhalation. Okay, so for these two processes there is an involvement of two muscles. The first muscles are intercostal muscles and the second is phrenic muscles. Let's see what they are and where they are located. I'm drawing here, as I said just now, lungs are covered by the rib cage, isn't it? So these are the ribs. Basically we have 12 pairs of ribs, and between the ribs there is muscle which is attached to the both. Okay, so the muscle which is between the ribs is called as intercostal muscle. Okay, and just below the lungs you are able to see a muscular part which is called diaphragm. Okay, this diaphragm is made of phrenic muscle. Okay, so this is a diaphragm and it is made of phrenic muscle, and between the ribs we find the intercostal muscles. These two muscles are very important and most involved in the breathing mechanism. Now let's learn about the inhalation. Okay, what are the changes that you can see here? The first point is it is an active process. It requires energy. Okay, but the expiration is the passive process which doesn't need any energy. So whenever we are taking this term as active, every active process require energy. Okay, and the next change that we see is the contraction of phrenic muscles and the external intercostal muscles. These two muscles gets contracted so that the chest cavity gets expanded. So since it got expanded, the air which is outside rushes inside, so that inhalation happens. In this process, diaphragm moves down, okay, and thoracic chamber increases in size. Just now I said thoracic chamber is nothing but the chest cavity, and it decreases the intrapulmonary pressure than outside. Okay, so it causes intrapulmonary pressure to get down. Okay. So this causes the air to rush inside, right? Now let's see about what is exhalation. Exactly opposite changes what happens in the inhalation happens in the expiration. Here it is in passive process which does not require any energy, but in the forced exhalation or forced expiration you require certain energy. Hence forced expiration is an active process, but the normal expiration is a passive process. Okay, normally if we breathe, if we exhale, we don't require any energy. But if you are forcibly exhaling while you're doing yoga, you do this, and for that it requires some energy, hence it is an active process. What happens here? The relaxation of muscles of diaphragm, nothing but phrenic muscles, and external intercostal muscles take place here. Hence the lungs get shrunk and they will put the air outside. So diaphragm moves upwards and thoracic chamber is reduced, okay, so that the air which is inside goes out. This causes the air to pass outside. Okay, and let's see the steps in the breathing now. There are basically 5 steps in the respiration entirely. The first step is breathing, nothing but just now we discussed about it. It is pulmonary ventilation, where the air passes inside and outside. Inhalation and exhalation comes under this. Second is the diffusion of gases. We learnt about this in when we are learning about alveolar sac, where the oxygen and carbon dioxide got exchanged through the alveolar membrane. Okay, so the alveolar sac consists of oxygen when it is inhaling, and that diffuses inside the blood, and carbon dioxide from the blood diffuses outside, so that the exchange of gases take place. The next is transport of gases. That means whatever the oxygen mixed with the blood, it is carried with the blood vessels and reaches to the tissues and cellular level, so that oxygen is supplied to each and every cell of the body. And after reaching to the cell, then the cellular respiration starts. The next process is diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between capillaries and blood tissue. Just now I said it is the exchange. And the next, utilization of oxygen by cells. So this is what called as cellular respiration, where catabolic reactions take place. Oxygen which got inside of the cell, suppose assume this as a cell, and it oxidates, it carry out the oxidation process, it breaks down the food and releases the energy. So this process is called cellular respiration, where glycolysis, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain takes place. So outcome of these processes is nothing but the release of energy, and energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate ATP, and when it gets used, the actual energy is utilized. Okay, so basically two types of respirations we are seeing. The external respiration, nothing but the exchange of gases and reaching to the cellular level, and the second process is cellular respiration, where the actual process of releasing of energy takes place. Okay, in the next class we will be learning about the further topics in the respiration. Thank you, students.